I have an important question. Do you want to be successful? I know you do. Have you spent time really defining what success means to you? Wherever you are on your understanding of what success means to you, this episode today is going to be incredibly helpful. We dive into the art of embracing change, imperfection, and the sacred feminine, ultimately your authentic self, in order to create the most success for your life. My incredible guest, Julie Dean Richards, she's an astrologer, attorney, a co-founder of the Female Alchemist, the School of the Deep Feminine, and she really shares how reconnecting with rituals, intuition, and the cycles of the moon can transform your daily life and help you create the life of your dreams. We're going to talk about how when you tap into your delight, your gratitude, creating some sacred spaces, they can help you align with your authentic self and you can find your success and your fulfillment. It's from trusting your body to talking to your food. Julie offers practical, mindful practices that help you navigate life's tough as shit moments with grace and freedom. If you've ever felt stuck in the grind or longed for a deeper connection to your intuition, and you're craving the ultimate massive fulfillment and success, this episode is your permission slip to slow down, let go of expectations, and embrace the power of your inner goddess. I'm so happy you're here. This episode is life-altering. Oh, welcome back, my beautiful, beautiful moms. I'm so excited that you're here, especially for this conversation. I am facing quite an amazing human being right now. Julie Dean Richards is here, as I mentioned in the bio. I'm so excited for you to actually just start talking because you've got such a colorful and beautiful resume, but also energy. And I think that's what I'm so excited for you to really, we were just talking about this before we even started recording. It's like, I really want you to share your story and share why you're interested in the sacred feminine and how you've allowed yourself to pivot in life and be open. That quote that always stays with me is like, the moment we're through changing is the moment we're through. And you are completely the opposite of that. So please introduce yourself to my community. I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh, thank you so much, Scotty. My name is Julie Dean Richards, and I I don't even know where to start, but let's just start. Let's go back. I do love the sacred feminine. I love learning about the sacred feminine, and that may seem kind of unusual for someone who's a lawyer and worked in research for a really long time, which are typically viewed as very masculine things. But my path, like many people's path, has been full of twists, turns, and surprises. And I like to
Love it.
say, I that like my life, what I want for my life, one of my keys is like delight. Like I want to be delighted by my life, you know?
Yeah. I love that. Love that.
Yeah. I want like surprises and fun things to come into my life and it to have this energy and brightness and joy to it and just to
Mhm.
feel that delight. And, all of us have to kind of go through big transformations to get there. And sometimes that sucks. Like sometimes it's the worst. And for me, I think my story, I always kind of begin with the beginning of my career, which was in research. And I got kind of swooped up by a giant tech company to come in and be a consultant for, high touch people like Harvard and Yale and Google and all those kinds of people to help them with their research. And it was during that process that my life kind of got turned upside down. And I was a new mom, but I guess I was pregnant actually my first year of working there. And I just started to learn some things about research that really surprised me. And I started to learn, it's kind of like the coming of age story. Like you get
Yeah.
disillusioned and you're like, oh my gosh, this is how the world works. Oh my gosh. Like, and for me, a lot of it was like, oh, money really does seem to rule research. Like, oh, the
Mhm.
outcomes are dependent on what people pay for. And I was seeing it because I was in it, and it wasn't just like my company or, other people. It's just everyone. It's rampant in the research industry. And it kind of
Mhm.
disillusioned me and opened my eyes. And it was that piece, that kind of having to go inward, having to ask questions of myself and ask
Mm.
questions about my life and re-look at my belief systems and everything like that that led me to go to law school. And during that process, the in-between process, I had two kids by that time. And I honestly have always thought that like birth is beautiful, that it's sacred. I have had a hospital birth, a home birth, and a free birth. So I've done all the kinds of
You've
births that
done
you
all of
can
it.
do.
Yeah.
I've done all the births. And I, you know, was in this really transitional period. And it was during that process that I started thinking about and learning about the sacred feminine, which I would like to define as, for me, some people, it's a buzzword right now, like sacred feminine or divine feminine. And people say this all the
Mhm.
time. But, and there are people out there, like there are people who do worship like a goddess figure, like a divine feminine, right? But when we say divine feminine, that's not what we're talking about as much, right? It's really more about what is the goddess inside of you? You know, what is the divine? What's divine inside of you? What's special inside of you?
Yeah.
What is your identity, right?
Yeah.
And finding that true sacred purpose, I think, is so poignant for people, so important for them. And for me, it just started to open all of these doors because I think a lot of people get caught up. We hear these beautiful words, or even in circles where you talk about like finding yourself or like finding your true purpose,
Mhm.
we get caught up in like these big, I want to say like fluffy words, like these big fluffy
Mhm.
epitaphs. And we don't like
Mhm.
bring it
Mhm.
down to being like really granular and really
Mhm.
everyday life. And for me, that was really important. You know, I'm a researcher, I'm a lawyer,
Mhm.
and for me, it's about the how. Okay, how? Yeah, like how do we do this? And I spent my, year before law school. And then when I went into law school, I found out I was pregnant 7 weeks in with my third, a little girl this time, right? And
Oh.
what can be more terrifying for me at that time? And it was just such, law school is hard. Like
Yeah.
it's hard. It's really hard. No matter
Yeah.
what, like even when you come in, like for me, I came in with a really heavy background, right? Background in the sciences, background in logic, background in communications, public relations. Like I had, kind of a thick career for someone starting law school. And man, it breaks you down. Doesn't matter if you
Mm.
already have a PhD or what, like there's this breakdown. And so my
Sure.
daughter was a piece of that. Finding out I was pregnant was incredibly overwhelming. And
Yeah.
I realized, man, if I'm going to do this hard thing, then I have to go hard into the divine feminine to be able to do this. Like I have to balance my life. I have to use the hows, and I have to do this my own way.
Gosh.
Absolutely 100% my own way.
Gosh.
Yeah, because
That is, I don't mean to interrupt you because I think
yeah.
that there's several different, roads that are kind of leading you to this intersection, right? Because you've
Mm-hmm.
got the field in research, which was already a developed field, right? It's a very
Mm-hmm.
formulated, this is how you get from A to B to C to D, right? You were same with motherhood. This is what motherhood is supposed to look like. This is what
Mm-hmm.
motherhood is supposed to feel like. Look, there's role
Mm-hmm.
models you can emulate in front of you and books to read, and then law school, right? But I love how right? Like this is how law school has happened. And this is what you
Mm-hmm.
do post law school. Like you had almost three linear worlds kind of converging into one intersection. And I love how the way you're really explaining it is you said, look, I love all of these things and all of
Mm-hmm.
them are important to me and they're serving a purpose, but there's still an energy and a flavor that's mine. How can I put my stamp on this so that I get the most out of these things for me, for my
Mm-hmm.
purpose of being here? And I love that that's kind of a beautiful way to really talk about this approach, this kind of mindset adoption, this filter, right? Of like, what does it mean to me? Because you had touched on, yeah, sacred feminine, manifestation, spirituality. While these things are not buzzwords, they are very buzzy right now. And I think people are going into saying, like, just tell me how. How do I do it? How do I
Mm-hmm.
manifest? How do I meditate?
Mm-hmm.
How do I, without how do I, understand the divine feminine, or how do I balance masculine and feminine without really doing hold on, well, what is that? Why do I want to learn it? What does that mean to me? And like you were saying, really taking it on that granular level, which is so, don't you love the world and the universe? I mean, here you are a researcher. Of course you're gonna research what this means to you, right? Like you actually were, your worlds were all coming together. So you're pregnant, you're in law school, you have another massive project on your plate, multiple, all at the same time. So what was the first thing that you did, if you can remember, when you felt the pressure? Like, how did you start? How did you step back and like deep breathe and say, okay, how do I want to do it my way?
Well, first I cried a lot. I, which actually I think is like so important. And that's why I mention it, because I let myself like fall apart, right? Like have that moment to totally let go, release, and basically be like, okay, I cannot do this. Like I cannot hold it. Like, God, please hold this for me, right? Like help me, the universe, right? Just pick me up, because I
Wow.
can't do this by myself, right? And so that was the first thing. I think, human design. Have you guys talked about human design on this podcast before? Okay,
Yeah, I'm
cool.
obsessed.
Cool.
Love it.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm a reflector.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm that little like unicorn baby coming down, right? And for me, as a reflector, like one of the biggest things, and people don't talk about this a ton, but it's easy to, like, you can't, it's very, very difficult for a reflector to follow structure all the time. Or like some people will say like, oh, you're flaky. I actually don't think I've never been called flaky before, but it is this, you need to have permission to show up differently every time, right? Because you're reflecting the situation, you're shape shifting into what's needed. And so you need that ability to be able to transform. And so for me, and this might, and I can give examples, like if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, right? This might be different for you. For me, I needed to clear some space to allow myself to shapeshift into something new.
Okay.
Okay, so the how of that, right, to get really granular, was part of it was finding what I think Lacey Phillips calls like your authentic code. So those are a few words, like 1 to 4 words that you feel like define you, who you are, your essence, who you want to become, right? Like that really call to you. And you can do this by asking yourself really simple questions. You can go into ChatGPT, ask it to ask you questions about yourself. And then you want the questions to be things like, what are 4 things that you think about every day? Or what are 4 things you talk about the most? What are 4 things that are the most organized in your house? What are your 4 favorite possessions? What are your 4 like things that you have saved on Instagram, Facebook, right? What do you save? What lights you up? So, and by doing that, right, you start to get a sense of like, oh, these kind of buckets, these 4 buckets, these are pieces of my authentic code, right? Like these
Love
are
it.
things that are part of me. And so that was a big part of it, was, okay, I need to now like look at who I actually am, right? Make space for myself. And the other part of making space is, of course, cutting out stuff that you don't actually need or want to do, right? Like learning to say no. Like during this period, like I couldn't hang out with anybody. I was like, I can't see you. I can't talk to anyone. Like I just have to be alone and like sleep and eat and cry and like read, right? Like those are the things, right? And so clearing space can be letting people who you have deep, relationships with know, hey, I'm not going to be as available, right? Like I need some space and time for myself to like figure some things out. That can also be like if there are little tasks in your life that you don't really have to do. Okay, this is a great example, like folding the socks, right? Like no one actually needs to fold the socks, right? Like
Folding underwear, right? Like,
yeah, for what purpose?
I used to.
Yeah, like really, for what purpose are you doing this thing, right? Make sure that you're only doing the things that core matter to you. Like I have a dear friend,
Yeah.
and this is like part of me, is part of my letting go was like I just had to let go of my house, right? Like, let go of it. It's okay if it's a mess. My kids are going to mess it up. I just don't have the energy to do that. And
Yeah.
also, I can let other people in my community, if they want to help me, then they can help me. You can recruit people to come help you. I know that's hard. Asking for help is so hard for so many mothers, but
Love it.
think about, I have a dear friend who, she is very organized and she loves her house clean, and like she vacuums every day. Like she vacuums a room of her house every day, right? And for her, if she were in my situation, maybe that's worth keeping because like that's
Yeah.
kind of her like meditative practice, or like that's just something she needs to feel good about herself. But for me, if I had to vacuum every day, I would die, right? Like I this would never work, right, in my life. And so, very practically, I would say, let yourself cry, cut out the
Yeah.
things that don't matter, the little tasks, right? Like, you don't need to peel the grapes. Like, you don't. And also, you don't have to peel your potatoes if you don't want to, right? I mean, maybe some people are like, I hate skins and I have to do that,
Maybe.
whatever. But
But
just
to what
get
you
rid
were
of those things.
saying, yeah, it's like I love how you, regardless of your human design, regardless of where you are in your life, what you said was permit yourself to show up
Mm-hmm.
as you, right? And that's exactly what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
You were like creating space,
Mm-hmm.
literally giving yourself some breathing room to figure out, who am
Mm-hmm.
I right now with all the stuff I
Mm-hmm.
have going on, with all the stuff that I've been through, with all the stuff that I'm choosing to focus on right now. Who am I? Who am I as I'm going through this? And taking that time to figure out, like, how many people have we asked, what do you like to do? They're like, I don't know. I like to watch my
Yeah.
kids' soccer
Yeah.
games. No, 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 no,
Mm-hmm.
no. You. And I think taking the time, creating the space and crying, there's so much clarity on the other side of crying. I think crying is
Mm-hmm.
so cathartic. I was listening to this really beautiful meditation at my son's football game, and I had tears streaming down my cheeks. I'm sure the other moms in the stands were wondering what the world was going on, but for me, it was just such a release. And I've had to learn how to become comfortable crying, right? Because I think a lot of times we're told that, well, we must be going through something that's, I don't know, shameful or really embarrassing or
Mm-hmm.
hard or something. But I love that
Mm-hmm.
you spent the time to figure out who, like, your authentic code, because then it allowed you, and I'm assuming it allowed you to be able to say no to those
Mm-hmm.
social events, to say no to the vacuuming, to folding the
Mm-hmm.
socks, because you were thinking, that's, I'm so confident in knowing what it is I need right now. I know that's not
Mm-hmm.
what I need right now. But you had to do
Mm-hmm.
the work. That wasn't just on a piece of paper in front of your face. Like, you had to realize, wait, I've got some inner work to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
really setting the boundaries around that, right, is kind of what was
Mm-hmm.
so important.
It was huge.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you're making space for yourself. Yeah. And you're cutting out the shit you didn't need. And then go on. I love this. I'm like
Yeah.
so engaged.
I was doing all that. I was finding my authentic code, and then I really started to dig in deep to the divine feminine. And I will say part of letting go for me was was also letting go of some of the law school have tos for me.
Okay.
Or like, and if you have a job or you work, maybe there's some things you think you have to do, but maybe you don't have to do them. Or like this idea that you don't have to do your very best work all the time, right? Maybe it's just your best work for that day,
Totally.
right? Yeah. And for when in law school, there's so much expected of you. You're supposed to read hundreds of pages a day, and you got to write up long briefs, and you got to do all the things. And also on top of that, people expect you to do something called moot court, which is like pretend court where you practice, and people expect you to write in the law school journal and stuff. And I just said, F that. Like, I will not, like that. I can't do those extra things, right? All I can do is my family
Okay.
and myself, right? That's all I
Okay.
can do. And
Yeah.
being okay with, I didn't have to do, sometimes instead of reading the whole thing, I would read a summary of the whole thing, right? Like I didn't need to read every one of those pages, really. Like, and
Mm,
honestly, it paid off. Like it paid off so many times because it was so unnecessary, right? They were asking us to read so many things that like did not matter, that weren't even asked about, tested on, or applied to the law. So for me, it was being really careful about discerning in my work life. Like this is my school, but school or work, if someone has that on their plate, like when is it okay to let go of having to absolutely do your best? And also, maybe there are things you're even doing in your work that you actually don't need to do and that someone else can pick up the slack, right?
yeah, that's hard. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things for us, especially as moms, because there's so much of our worth is tied to our significance, how much we're getting done, right? Like, how many things am I
Mm-hmm.
checking off? Am I the person that my kids go to? Do I
Mm-hmm.
know their hungry cry? Do I know what's going on in school? And
Mm-hmm.
you think, if I'm not taking care of this, does that mean I don't care? Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
you start to play this game with yourself. If I'm not exhausted, if I'm not pushing beyond my capacity, if I'm not burned out or working as hard as that mom or that other, lawyer or that person over here, then am I not as significant? Do I not care as
Mm-hmm.
much? But I think what I've learned, and tell me if you can relate, the more I've created space to hear my own voice, and the more I've learned to like listen to that and take it seriously, the more productive I actually am for the things that I
Mm-hmm.
really, really care about, those priorities, those things that really matter. And I feel like I'm sleeping better. Before I did this work, I'd lay in bed and think, oh my gosh, I'm the worst mom. All they did was eat saltine crackers today. I didn't hug them enough. I yelled at them too much. All this
Mm-hmm.
self-doubt. And so it would keep me up at night and I'd feel
Mm-hmm.
a shame spiral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I have more clarity. I'm like, gosh, if I'm focusing on my family, my mental and physical health, my relationships, and my message, my gosh, I sleep like a baby. And there's so much ripple effect in that. But it's hard, that conversation with yourself. I'm not reading all of it. Am I still going to be doing enough? How did you
Mm-hmm.
work yourself through those, learning how to talk to yourself that way?
I think yeah, doubts definitely come and they definitely would come up. And especially when I would get close to like exams and be like, did I do enough? And my husband would tease me sometimes. He was like, I don't know how you do it, but like you put the least amount of effort in and get the biggest output, right? Like you somehow end up
You're like,
getting the
I
biggest
figured out
output.
my secret. I've done
Yeah,
it.
well, yeah. Well, it really, but like it's so funny. And at first I would just get so offended by that because I'd be like, I'm working so hard and like, how dare you, say those things to me because you don't see how hard I'm working. And but in many ways he was right, right? Like for me, it was really all about assessing, is it worth it? Is this 100% worth my time? Because my time is more valuable to me than anything else, right?
Got it.
And my sanctuary, my peace, and like being able to
Mm,
focus on my daughter and all the other things, all the things I really
sure.
wanted to focus on and learn and read. And so I would find, I would let myself, if this sounds, I would let myself surrender, right? Like I just surrendered. Like I would go into class, and I would read as much as I could read and I would read the summary of the rest or whatever. And if I didn't get it done, I would just trust
And
that
get
I
it
would be
done.
taken care of, right? It would be taken care of because I knew I could learn it, right? Like it's not about learning it. Everyone's
Hmm.
capable. You can definitely learn it. It's just about trusting that you'll be taken care of as you surrender all those extra things, right? Like as you surrender
Courage.
that. And I had never had, in law school they cold call you, right? They just call on whoever randomly, and if you haven't read it,
So
then it's like
stressful.
embarrassing, right? Yeah. It's stressful.
That's so-
It's embarrassing because, then you haven't read it. Honestly, never not once ever did I ever get called on a time I hadn't read it or finished reading it.
So it did take care of you.
It
It
Yeah,
did take.
it took
Yeah.
care of me. I was taken
Yeah.
care of, and I had done enough, right? And that was what it was really about, was do me and the universe feel good about this, right? Do me and God feel good about this? Have I done enough to that preserves my energy, my abilities? And so I would just kind of let go and let myself, I guess I would think about it as like flow. Like I would let myself just flow into
Love,
it, right? Flow
love
in,
that.
flow out. And that is just trusting. It's trusting that what you've chosen to do is enough, that you're guided, right? Trusting in your intuition. And that was a big
Mhm.
part for me. This is for me where the sacred feminine really comes in, because the sacred feminine is all about trusting your body, right? Learning how
Mhm.
to trust and look at your body not as something evil, because I think that's really what we're taught to look at it as, right? We're taught that, like, in so many different ways. I don't mean just like, oh, the body is fallen and evil in like some kind of religious context. What I mean is, on TV and on all the media and everything, like how many times do people complain about their bodies, or say they're not, but their bodies aren't good enough, or show you that your body's not good enough, or how many times do we hear like, oh, my cravings, they're my enemy, right? They're so, they're
I'm
so
so
hurtful for
bad. I
me.
ate a
I'm
cookie
so bad.
today, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like
Yes.
I'm so
Yeah.
bad, right? Yeah.
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 If only my body looked like that one, or my body betrayed me and now I have stretch marks, or whatever it is. We use these words about our bodies, and truly,
Mm.
because the feminine is the creator, right? She really is. She is the creator of the body, right? Women are, you act like a veil, right? You bring forth matter and life, and that makes you the keeper of the body, right? Like that. That's why when someone's sick, like, who do we go to? We go to mom, because she's the
Yeah.
keeper of the body, right? That's what we do. When you need something, who are you going to reach out and ask? You're going to ask those other moms, right? When you're a mom and you're struggling and you need help healing something, you reach out to the other moms. That's what you do, right?
100%.
and
100%.
and that's because women are naturally, we are the divine feminine is the keeper of the body, the creator, the keeper, the veil. And so I think a big part of the divine feminine itself is learning how to trust your body and to love your body. And if you can do those things, then you'll start to be able to tap into your inner intuition, right? Because intuition is a very physical thing, right? Even if
It
it's a thought
is.
coming into your mind, right? Intuition, it's that gut feeling that you get, right? The knowing that you have, the feeling and the pings in your heart. And we can only start doing that if we will start actually loving and trusting our bodies. And so
Love that.
that was a huge thing
Beautiful
for
message.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so, what are some ways that you started doing that? How did you start to trust your body? Like, how did you start to actually bring in the sacred feminine into? You're pregnant, you're in school, you probably have
Hmm.
literally no time.
Hmm.
So, how are you fitting this in when you're already stretched so thin?
Well, I was like super obsessed with it, so that helped a lot. But I would say, so this is where I'm going to talk about a scary word, okay? We'll talk about a really scary word. And that scary word is ritual. And ritual is a scary word for people, because we hear the word ritual and we think about like people in cloaks or something like that, like, or, someone scary, some kind of culty thing.
Mhm.
But really what I'm going to tell you is a ritual is just a way, it's something that you can do over and over again to draw attention to the importance of something, to help
Mm.
yourself know this thing is important. It's a thing we do to recenter ourselves. It's a
I
thing we
love that.
do to slow down, right? To help our bodies remember. It's something that can bring safety to us. Whereas a habit, right? A habit is something we do over and over again without thinking, right? Because we're not thinking. We're doing it because it's a habit. So a ritual is about having intention. And so for me,
Mm.
very practical ways of applying the divine feminine starts with ritual. And some really simple, and this can be so simple, right? Because like I think people are probably thinking like, oh, I have to have like candles and I have to put down all these things or whatever. No, 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 no. A ritual can be writing in your journal every day, right? Setting aside time to write in your journal, maybe like a gratitude journal. A ritual can be taking time to be grateful for your food, right? That can be a small ritual you do before you eat. A ritual can be going outside each night and looking up at the moon just to see the moon phases, just to understand what they look like and how the moon shifts and changes and how you shift and change inside, right?
Yeah.
These are all small little rituals that
Mhm.
you could do. And I think that starts, all rituals start with clearing and creating sacred space.
Okay.
Um, which is something that we don't often talk about. I think we're missing this piece often, but the idea of consecrating something or making it sacred, right, is really the idea is just setting it apart from the regular, right? Setting it apart from the grind, making space that you can spend time in and feel seen and noticed. And so when I say making sacred space, that can be space on your calendar for yourself, right? Like that can be an hour that's like your hour, right? That's your sacred space. But there's also this idea of creating sacred space where you set a place aside for yourself,
Yeah.
maybe a small corner of your home, maybe a part of your kitchen table, maybe a part of your kitchen countertop, or maybe you just
Sure.
say to yourself, right? You physically clear some space, right? Maybe there's toys all over the floor, like in my house, and you clear a tiny little space, like tiny little circle for
Love
yourself,
it.
and you just say, this space is my sacred space now, and I'm setting this space apart for this time right now
Mhm.
to give back to myself, right?
Love that. I
Um,
love that, even the visual of like setting that space apart from the grind, from everybody else's rituals, from everybody else's to-do lists. And
mhm,
like you said too, it's like it's not even just what you're doing in that moment, it's the energy behind it that you're saying this is important to me. This
mhm,
right here. Even
mhm,
just like you
mhm,
said, just spending time around the table with your family, eating this food, taking a moment like I'm important. You're important. This moment is important. And I
mhm,
love it because it doesn't mean, I always tell my clients, I'm like, you don't have to go, hike the Himalayas and transcendental meditate for 2 hours every single day. My gosh, I mean, one of the things I do every day is put my hand on my heart, close my eyes, and just breathe. Like
mhm,
breathing. Just so often we forget to breathe. And I think it doesn't, our brains like to overcomplicate it and tell us that we don't have time for this. We can only do what
mhm,
we know, right?
mhm.
And a lot of times I do think we end up on autopilot and then we wonder, why do I feel so disconnected?
Yeah,
Why don't I feel good in my own skin?
yeah.
Why am I always chasing losing the 10 pounds, but I still don't feel good when I lose the 10 pounds? Where's the
Mm,
disconnect?
mhm,
And I love how you said it. It's like this ritual. It doesn't mean it has to be something that's out of our grasp, but it's putting
mhm,
some real different intention behind the things that are important to us, which all goes back to taking the time to even carve out what's important to you, right? Like
mhm,
what matters
mhm,
to you, right?
mhm.
And see how it like you've connected all of it, right? Like you've
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
like, and I think that's so beautiful. And you did talk about why it's important, but how, if you can think of one ritual that you love, how has it made a difference for you in your life as a busy working mom with huge goals?
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about one that it's a little well, actually two are coming up, so maybe I'll talk about them, but it's a little more hippy dippy. It's not too involved or anything like that, but it made such a huge difference for me, which was I would do that thing where I go out each night and I would look up at the moon just to see like how it changed, right? I would go up and look, and something you can do with this, and I would journal about this too, but something you can do is just like draw a simple moon, like the shape of a moon each day, right? How did it get bigger and bigger and bigger? And it's really beautiful to do that because it helps you see the moon is such a great reflection of us as women. And I will love to talk about this because the moon is rhythmic, right? She has her rhythms and her cycles, but she's ever changing. She's always shifting. She is totally dark sometimes and then completely full and bright, and sometimes there's only a sliver of her left, and sometimes she's halfway there, but she'll always come back, right? Like she will always come back because she has this rhythm, just like you'll always come back, right? You will always, sometimes you're completely dark, and it's okay to sit in the
Love
dark,
that.
right? It's okay not to know. And sometimes you're full of life and you're bright and you're shining and you're dramatic and everybody's looking at you. And we ebb and flow just like the moon ebbs and flows. And something that's gone wrong for women, I think especially, is we've been taught and told to be good enough, we need to be like men or like the masculine, right?
Totally.
Our whole
Totally.
lives, like, right? And a big part of this is that the masculine is quite linear. It's very linear. It's point A to point B, right? We go straight up the mountain. That's the way that we do things. It's easy to see, it's easy to carve out. But women do not work like that. They are not linear. Women are cyclical and they live in cycles, right? They have
Mhm.
an internal cycle. They move with the external cycles. And that's why I think it's so powerful. This small little ritual, even if you don't want to draw the moon, you don't want to journal about it, you only have like 30 seconds each day, literally just go outside and find the moon every night, look at it, because it will help you. And like for me, it helps connect myself to this idea that I am ever changing, I am ever shifting, and it's okay for me to be dark sometimes, and it's okay for me to be light, and it's okay for me to reflect and to receive, because that's what the moon does, right? She reflects all the light given to her and she receives it. She allows herself to be given gifts of light and beautiful, beautiful things. But it's not that light, right? It's not the sun that makes the moon so powerful. What makes the moon so powerful is that she controls all the tides. She controls the water, right? She controls the water in everybody's bodies. We can see this scientifically, even with things like parasites, like they move with the moon because she moves all the water in everybody's bodies all the time. And she's pushing it around. And you are the same way, right? Women are the same way. You're moving the water. And that water might not seem powerful because it's soft and because it flows. It doesn't look like fire, right? But water is the most powerful force on earth, and it makes huge cliffs and mountains crumble, right? They crumble at the feet of the ocean because because water is just so powerful, and the moon is what's moving that. And so that really helped me to connect to this idea that like I am like the moon and I can have cycles and I can have rhythms. So I'd say that's one small thing people could do.
That is possibly one of my most favorite things I've ever heard. And I love it because there's so much talking about what you said before, really giving yourself permission to be who
Mm-hmm.
you are in that day. It
Mm-hmm.
goes back to what you were saying, that some days we're going to read the article and take all and annotate it and
Mm-hmm.
make all the notes happen, and we'll be ready to be called on. And some days we want to read the summary and we're going to show
Mm-hmm.
up and be exactly in the energy. And I think a lot of times, similar to the example you were given about the body, if we're not keeping up with that linear pace, then somehow we are the problem. And it's this constant thing that I've been always trying to do for myself in my business, especially as a mom. Rather than thinking I need to change in order for the world to work, it's about how can the world work better with me showing up as me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it is this beautiful permission. And I love it when we can, because if you can look at the moon, it almost makes it not fall on your shoulders, right? Like you were saying before when you said,
Mm-hmm.
universe, I can't do this all, right?
Mm-hmm.
For us to muster up the strength every single day to say, I'm going to be at a different pace today. I'm going to be at a
Mm-hmm.
different, I'm shining light today. I'm going to be full today. I'm going to be this. That's hard out of practice to be able to stand up and say that. But when you can look at something bigger than you, an energy outside of you, you do feel supported. And it's easier to say, I can do that. I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
I have permission.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that and I love this example because we all have 30 seconds, all of
Mm-hmm.
us. Oh my gosh, take your
Mm-hmm.
kids with you. Take your
Mm-hmm.
kids. Have them
Yeah,
go draw the moon. What a beautiful
totally.
family experience, right? Like it doesn't
Yes.
have to be in a vacuum. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
it's like go outside, look at the moon, 30 seconds. You're like, I didn't even know she was a full moon tonight, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I have goosebumps. Like I think that's such a beautiful example. And it's a possible example. I know a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times, especially with moms and women, because we're magnificent, we think if I'm going to do this, I'm going to knock it out of the park. I'm going to
Yep.
do it 110%,
Yep.
and I'm going to know all the information. If I'm going to be a moon expert, I'm going to be a moon expert. I'm going to
Yep.
go,
That's right.
and then what happens is we're like, hold on, I already have 700 things. How am I going to do that too? So then we tell ourselves, I don't have time for it. I guess I can't
Mm-hmm.
change. I guess I can't do
Mm-hmm.
this. But this is like a bite-sized way for us to just reconnect to ourselves and appreciate what's going on around us. And that
Mm-hmm.
it's a beautiful example. I'm obsessed. I don't even know what I'm
Oh,
gonna call this
thank you.
episode. It'll be like the moon Julie and the Moon, changing your life in 40 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
But you said you had a second one. What's the second one that you love that's changed your life?
Yeah, I do have a second one. I do want to say, and letting yourself be ever changing, right? That process of letting go of perfection and letting yourself show up differently every day is what will make you successful. It will. It will make you successful. Kind of like the example of me in law school, right, where my husband was like, you put in the smallest like input, but you get the greatest output, right? And
Yeah.
in many ways, right, he's right. Like I got great grades in law school, and I didn't do what everybody else did. I did what I could do and I let myself shift and change, and that paid off, right? And then taking the bar, I ended up in the top third of the country, not because I was such a great studier, right? Not because I was like, oh, I'm so great, I'm so smart. Honestly, like I had a kid in the hospital at this time, like I had crazy stuff happening, and like I was like, okay,
Wow.
I have to show up for my kid, and I'm going to take this risk, and like hopefully I know enough, and hopefully I've done enough, and like I'm just going to let like Jesus take the wheel, right? God take the wheel and carry me. And it ended up being better than I could have imagined, right? Like now I can practice anywhere in the country, but it wasn't because I was sitting and cramming and trying to, I did do some cramming. Not, it wasn't that I never studied. I don't want to make people feel that way because obviously I put time into it, but I did it
Sure.
like the moon, right? Like I did it on my pace. I did it
Be like the
in the
moon.
ways that I felt to do it, right? And let myself show up in a different way. So just so people know, because I think the trap is if I don't, and I struggle with this all the time, if I don't, then no one will, right? If I don't, it'll never get done. If I don't, I won't be successful. I have to do it. I have to be the one. If I let go, it will never succeed. I will never succeed, right? But I'm here to tell you, I promise you, and the bar is a hard test. I promise. It's a tough test, right? Like it is like the most linear masculine thing you can do. But guess what? If you work like the moon and you let yourself work in your tides, right? Work with your waves, right? Push when the wave is good and let yourself come back when the wave is out, right? When the tide's out, let yourself go out. When the tide's in, let yourself go full force. But if you work that way, you will succeed. 100%. You will
No doubt.
succeed. Yeah, no doubt.
And
100%.
it comes back to that, the sacred feminine, which you talked about. It it isn't outside of us. I think so often we're looking
Mhm.
for relief and we're looking for guidance and answers outside of us. And while, of course, I'm meditating, I'm connecting to my spirit guides, you can almost say, well, that's kind of outside of you, right? Because,
Mhm.
but it's a pathway through us, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's something
Mhm.
that has always calmed me down, especially when I'm
Mhm.
feeling like I'm not good enough. I didn't get
Mhm.
everything done. Something did inevitably fall through the cracks, or,
Mhm. Mhm.
I've got an 18-year-old and we're waiting to hear from college and we're not getting all the answers that we want. And you're
Mhm.
thinking, how did I fail? If I had been
Mhm.
different, if we had done XYZ, maybe this would have worked out. But when I start to feel that way, I'm like, hold on, come back to here, come back to base, come back to grounding, come back to that core energy, that physical. It's not just spiritual, it's physical, that inner peace inside of you. Because not only does it just help you catch your breath, but then you can say, okay, what's the best next action step to take from this place? And it always
Mhm.
just aligns me back to my inner peace and energy, which is to your point, if we're acting from there, we're always going to get a better outcome than if we're acting from the chasey, stressed, oh my gosh, beat ourselves up kind of energy, right? So,
Mhm.
you don't even have to be spiritual or woo woo. You don't have to necessarily connect with the moon in order to see,
Yeah.
like, wait, if I trust myself, if I do what feels good to me, I'm going to
Mhm.
get to where I want to go, probably less burned out,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And
100%.
then,
A hundred
and then I can
percent.
be there for my kids if you're, you were saying life is always happening.
Mhm.
Life is always lifing. People are always
Mhm.
peopling. Our kids are always doing
Mhm.
stuff. And it's like, okay, well,
Mhm.
how can I be ready to handle whatever life is dishing out in a way
Yeah.
that feels really good to me?
Yeah.
Right. And
100%.
I love that so much. I could talk to you for hours. You're just the way you explain things is very digestible, and
Mhm.
it's taking concepts that which I think can overwhelm people. right?
Yeah.
Like if, and if you don't understand about astrology or the moon or the sacred feminine, or you
Mm-hmm.
don't, you're not meditating or have this
Mm-hmm.
relationship, it can almost feel like, oh, well, that's not meant for me. I,
Mm-hmm.
that's somebody
Mm-hmm.
else's journey, not mine. But the way you're sharing this, it's going to help my moms because they're exhausted and they're burned out and they are
Mm-hmm.
chasing perfection, but they just want success, right? They just want
Mm-hmm.
their success.
Mm-hmm.
And you've literally helped them with some real life tools that they can start
Mm-hmm.
doing today. So I'm really grateful for that because that's such a gift. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And that is my hope when I share things. And that's what I try to do in my school. That's what I try to do when I do
Yeah.
readings, whatever I do. For me, it's all about bringing it down to a level that you can understand and I can understand and getting back to the how, right? Like, how are we going to do this? How are
Yeah.
we going to practically pull together? So I'm glad that you noticed that. And I'll just real quick share that second one because it's super easy,
Oh
but
yeah. Yeah.
it's going to sound silly, but I promise there's science to back this up, is to talking to your food. Talk to your food when you
Okay.
are making your food. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me more.
So,
I love it.
yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of good studies out from Japan that talk about that when we talk, it's the same reason this works with plants, but when we talk to water, something that's mainly water, the molecules change, right? The hydrogen bond shift and the water shifts. And it's called structured water. The structure of the water completely changes. And so when you talk to your food, it changes that structure of the water inside your food. And it actually allows it to be better for you, more easily digestible, and to just taste better. Sounds so crazy. I know it totally sounds crazy. Yeah, but for
I love
me,
it. You backed it up with science. I mean,
yeah,
so there you go.
for me, it's really all about, though, the practice is not about whether or not it works on your food, because I also do this sometimes with my things. Like I will say, thank you, refrigerator, right? Like, thanks for doing
Totally.
your job, right? It's not, it's not about whether or not like the refrigerator can hear me or like anything or has a soul or whatever. What it's actually about, it's for me, right? It's a gratitude practice for me, right? To feel
Hmm.
grateful, to
Hmm.
allow myself to appreciate the little things in my life. And so when I cook my food, I will take, like, let's say I'm cooking with herbs like thyme or something like that, right? I'll take the time
Love
and I'll
it.
say, thank you, thyme. Like, thank you, herb, for doing this for me. Thank you for,
Love it.
being cooked. Thank you, animal. And they do this in Japan. They say gochisa samadeshita at the end of meals to thank the animal for giving its life, right? For them so that they can eat. And we can do the same thing while we cook. We can say, right? Thank you, herbs, for giving your life, or thank you for giving us a delicious meal. You can even, this is part of the reason we bless our food. You can bless your food, right? Say a blessing on it. It doesn't have to be like a typical grace blessing. Like it can just be like, let this food be nourishing and help it to fill me up.
Hmm.
Blessed be, right? Like let
I
that be
love it.
blessed in that way. And so that's
I
something I
love that.
do.
I
Yeah.
love
And
it. I talk to my plants, so I get it.
yeah.
It's a beautiful way to practice gratitude. And what I love so much is you cannot be grateful and anxious at the same time. It's impossible. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing this throughout your day, you don't even realize that you're giving your nervous system a break at the same time, right? That you're
Mm-hmm.
actually grounding yourself into the moment. You're being super present. You're
Mm-hmm.
not having to make up stuff either. I think a lot of times when
Mm-hmm.
people are like, oh, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's the disconnection of the energy. It's not even doing its job.
Yeah.
But I love it. And again, another beautiful activity to do with your kids,
Yeah.
right? Like you can
Yeah.
include the whole family. Like what a cool energy shift. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
do that today. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you so much.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, tell us where everybody can find you. I'm going to share everything in the show notes, but just where can they find you? How can they work with you? And how can they get into your world?
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. I will say, just so you know, if you talk to your food, it really does work. Because a week after I started doing it, my husband was like, "What have you been doing to the food recently? It's amazing." What has changed? It's just so on par. So, anyway, just a plug for that. It works.
Love it. I can't wait.
People
I'm
will
going to start
notice.
today. I'll keep you
Yeah.
posted.
Keep me posted.
Thank you,
I tell
coffee.
a
I love you.
difference. Yes, yeah, tell it. And you'll notice the change in the texture too when you talk to your water, especially. Anyway, people, where you can find me. I have my Instagram account is Astrological Attorney. Astrological
Love it.
Attorney. You can find me there. You can also find me on my website, which is astrologicalattorney.com. And then
Perfect.
our Feminine Alchemist School is just opening. We just took our first round of ladies through. It was amazing. And
Love.
by December 21st, the winter solstice, everything will be open. You can go to Feminine Alchemist, MYST, like mystical,
Okay.
femininealchemist.com, and take a look.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to put everything in the show notes so y'all can just scroll down and click the links there. You're incredible. I feel like my molecules have shifted after being in this conversation with you. So thank you so much. You are such a blessing, and I'm so happy to know you, and I'm so excited to drop this episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Such a pleasure.